All right, welcome back. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the first stage of cellular respiration, known as glycolysis, in this mini lesson. So when you see this term glycolysis, think of, okay, glyco, that kind of sounds like glucose or glycogen, which is a sugar, right? So think, and then lysis we know is breaking apart or bursting. So think of glycolysis as sugar splitting. So the goal of glycolysis is to break apart glucose. Now, glucose is C6H12O6. So there's 6 carbon atoms there. So if you take a look at this figure down below, we have our carbon. There's 6 of them. There you go. And the goal is to break it down into pyruvate, which is a 3-carbon molecule. So we have 3 carbons, 2 of them. We have 2 of those pyruvate molecules. Each pyruvate, it has 3 carbons. Okay, so we're taking our 6-carbon glucose, and the end goal is to separate them into 2 separate molecules. Okay, now this whole process occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell, so that it's not involving the mitochondria. And it's a multi-step process that includes an energy investment phase as well as an energy payoff phase. And at the end of this process, we're going to net yield some energy. And some of that energy in the form of electrons are going to be carried to a different step. And the electron carrier is NAD. So just to give you kind of a visual of where this is occurring inside of your cell. So it's occurring in the cytosol or in the cytoplasm of your cell. So here we have our big kidney looking mitochondrium. That is not involved with glycolysis. So glycolysis is happening outside of the mitochondrium. Now, also important to note that it does produce a little bit of ATP, okay? And it sets it up for the cellular respiration other steps, the pyruvate oxidation, citric acid cycle, and oxidative phosphorylation. So if something happens to glycolysis, if this step of the chain somehow does not work, it breaks down, then that shuts down everything else. Okay, so we cannot continue with pyruvate oxidation if glycolysis fails. Okay, so just be aware of that. Now, in the previous or 2 slides ago, I mentioned that glycolysis involves an energy investment phase and an energy payoff phase. Well, the reason for that is because we're taking glucose, and glucose, it's going to need some energy in order to break apart, okay? So we have actually 2 ATP are going to be initially used to allow that reaction to take place, okay? So the 2 ATP are going to undergo a reaction and going to form 2 ADP and 2 phosphate. And so that's going to provide the energy needed to break apart glucose into 2 pyruvate. Okay? So we're going to invest 2 ATP into this process, but by investing 2 ATP in this process, we're going to actually gain some energy from that. There's going to be a payoff of energy. Because remember, glucose, that is an energy-rich molecule. So when it breaks apart into 2 pyruvate, okay, it's an exergonic reaction. It's going to release some energy in the process. So we're going to end up with, even though we've invested 2 ATP in the energy phase, we're going to end up with 4 ATP in the end. So there's going to be a net gain of 2 ATP molecules. Okay, so we used 2 ATP to get the reaction started, but then the payoff was 4 ATP. So our net result is that the whole process gave us a net gain of 2 ATP. Right? But that's not the only thing that we gained. We also gained 2 NADH. So remember, NADH is electron carriers. They contain 2 electrons in a hydrogen ion. Right? So that was through the NAD plus, basically undergoing that gaining of electrons to form NADH. Okay, so NADH, we ended up at the end of our glycolysis process. We ended up with 2 ATP and 2 NADH. We also gained 2 pyruvate, basically through the breaking apart of that glucose molecule into the pyruvate. Okay, and then just as a byproduct, there's some water that was formed. Now, you don't need to memorize all of these different enzymes that are involved and anything like that, but I do want you to see the formula here, these starting points. So we have glucose, we have that C6H12O6. In order for glucose to start the process of being broken apart, we need ATP, okay? So it takes energy to start this process of breaking glucose down into 2 separate molecules. Okay, so that's where that ATP is needed to start the process of breaking apart the bonds between our carbons and our hydrogens and our oxygens within this glucose molecule. So you can see here 2 ATP are used up in that process. Okay. And then the 2 ATP are going to be gained from that process. So we have for each one of the 3 phosphate, or excuse me, the 3 carbon molecules that resulted, okay, we're going to gain some energy from that, okay? And that's through basically the NAD plus gaining electrons to form NADH, and then this molecule will be losing the electrons through the process. Okay, so we're ending up with, at the end, this pyruvate or 3 carbon chained molecule. We're also gaining some energy, and we're getting some NADH. Okay, so here's our checkpoint question. For each glucose molecule process, what are the net molecular products of glycolysis? So this is a good chance to write down some of that, what you think we ended up with at the end. So we know that we ended up with the glucose breaking apart into a 3 carbon chain molecule called pyruvate, but we ended up with 2 of those. So we have 2 pyruvate molecules. We also ended up with a net total of 2 ATP. Okay. We also know that we ended up with a 2 NADH carrier molecule, electron carriers. Okay, so here's our net result of glycolysis. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this next. So glucose, with the help of some enzymes and 2 ATP that were added, we ended up with 2 pyruvate, 2 ATP net. We also, sorry, do I have it written down? No, I don't. We also get the NADH, 2 of those NADHs. Okay, so we've undergone glycolysis, and now that pyruvate is going to enter the mitochondrium in order to undergo pyruvate oxidation. The NADH is going to enter the mitochondrium, and it will be used in oxidative phosphorylation. So you can see this arrow, this white arrow that's kind of pointing to oxidative phosphorylation. That's the electron carrier, the NADH. So that's where it's going to end up. The pyruvate itself is going to enter the mitochondrium. Okay.